So over the last 2 or 3 years, I've probably reviewed around 200 articles, and I've also hired a litany of different writers from all types of walks, mainly engineering and technical writers, but probably hired around 30 writers, seen their work, evaluated their work, and the same thing comes up time and time again. And so what I want to talk to you about today are the 4 deadly sins of bad writing. It'll take a decent article and drive it straight into the dirt. A lot of this is sourced from Strunk and White, Elements of Style. I like to read through this book occasionally, go over it time and time again. It's one of those books that I like to keep by me and learn from a little bit every day. And so 4 of these deadly sins are aligned directly with some precepts in the book. So there's 21 different points that they point out. So these guys are old school, back in the day, even pre-typewriter, but all their concepts still apply very much today. Regardless, here, without further ado, are your 4 deadly sins. It's the lack of design structure or no design structure, needless words, what I like to call just weak sauce or passive voice. We hear a lot about passive and active voice, and I want to go through what that looks like, as well as just general vagueness. The first thing is no design structure. And what this comes down to is, what are you trying to do with a paper? A lot of people will just start throwing words on a page, and before you know it, it'll meander from first person to third person, maybe even back to second person. And worse than that, there's no points that the paper is driving to. It's just a collection of facts that just falls sloppily on the table. And so what I'll say here is, I come from an organic traffic generation perspective, representing Momentify, the tech products. What I'll say is we do have that kind of bent, but nonetheless I like to start off making that major point. So right up front in the paper, it's clear, like, hey, here's what we're going to talk about. Some writers, depending on your style, you may want to tease that out. And then your supporting point from an SEO perspective, once again, that's going to be your H2s. And sometimes you'll have what I call an auxiliary type topic. For instance, if you're looking at a PLC, maybe those first 3 headings are about different elements of the programmable logic controller, and then you get down further and then you want to compare it against a SCADA system or something along those lines. And then finally tie that all in together with a conclusion so that the writer or the reader remembers what you told them you were going to say. Nonetheless, whatever that structure looks like, it's always great to put an outline together, whether it's a white paper type of article or whether it's even more something creative that you're wanting to exert into that world. So the other thing is, don't meander, don't pontificate, don't get stuck in and maybe spending way too much time on your support point number 1 before you move on to support number 2. So you'll see some micro imbalances that are created during that time. The other thing is needless words. This I see all the time, particularly when dealing with engineers. Example here, we focused on the fact that efficient and effective use of fabrication employees' time. And you can see that there's a lot of words that really don't belong here. On the fact. Yes, you can get rid of that. Don't worry about focusing on the fact. Efficient and effective use. Once again, another opportunity to strike through. And so you can see this rewrite right here is the action goes back to the electrical department supervisor who's creating the problem to begin with. That, as I talk about in the next sequence, is an example of active versus passive voice. And that's also another major sin that we see is passive voice. Ball valves they are characterized. Ball valves are categorized. I've seen entire papers that simply follow this passive voice, and you can see how it drains the energy out. Passive voice is okay here and there again, but when your entire paper is constructed in such a way where it's all passive, you're barking up the wrong tree, right? Put the focus on valves. The valves are doing something. The most common type of industrial valve, ball valves, provide service for commodity applications. And it tells you how the spherical shell of metal rotates in and out of the flow path. A lot more bounce to that, and it feels a lot more energetic. The 4th deadly sin is what I like to call the great vagueness. To be vague is to obscure the truth. And here's an example. The first paragraph you're reading here, there's no detail in the entire segment. It simply lists out a series of accomplishments and very flowery language, but you don't really know exactly what Edward did. Versus the second one is more concrete. It's explicit what Edward did. And as a result, that vision is painted in your mind of who Edward is. He's an action-oriented person who cares about people and wants to accomplish good things. And that's an important distinction between the two. So you'll see that a lot where writers will want to be very general, cover all bases, and a result, it dilutes the language, it dilutes the meaning, and confuses the readers. So a few practical tips to alleviate these 4 deadly sins. One thing, when I got started writing a lot more, I installed Yoast on my WordPress site. So that'll tell you how many passive and active voices you're using. There's a lot of other alternatives like Grammarly. Even the free one is great as a Chrome extension to your browser. You can tell when you're misspelling words, using the wrong tense, those sort of things. Verb conjugations. The other thing that I would say is when you get confused between active and passive, just remember who does the thing, who is doing the thing, and try to put that at the front of your sentence. For instance, Tom ran a race versus the race was ran by Tom. So this one has more bounce, more possession, more life to it. The other thing, begin with the end in mind. So always start with what the structure looks like. What are we trying to accomplish with this piece? Who are your different stakeholders that are involved? Sketch out what your headings look like and start with that. And then always be forthright with your reader. The greatest writers that I read will use very descriptive language to bring their point across. So I encourage you to do the same. That'll give more life to your paper. It'll be unique. And in this age of AI, it'll definitely help you stand out from the crowd. So the last thing, remember, is the writer and editor wear different hats. So I recommend doing these things completely at different times. Write, let that paper sit for 24 hours. You come back to it, you'll be surprised at how much more efficient and clear you can make that paper with just even a 10-minute glance through. So do that writing and then editing. Lastly, if you got any questions about this, drop me a line, travis@momentatech.com. I'm LinkedIn at Travis Zebro. And thanks for hanging out. Good luck with your writing.